regret it. I promise you.
Point shooter, 43% of the season. Jackson Davis coming with some nasty. Closest they have been since the early seconds. Peck on top. Jackson Davis with a volleyball spike.
Shots and a tremendous rim protector.
He is just too good.
Y'all will regret it. I promise you. This was actually a tweet sent out by the Warriors' second round pick, Trayce Jackson Davis, when he was passed on by his college town team, the Indiana Pacers. Fresh out the draft, and the kid's already got a chip on his shoulder. Hey, what's happening, everyone? This is Swish. Today's video is the third installment in the series of Warriors offseason moves, so if you haven't yet seen the first two videos, check them out in the top right of your screen for an in-depth perspective now. If it didn't motivate a player like Jackson Davis enough that he fell so far in a draft that had him mocked as a late first/early second rounder, the Pacers neglecting to select him in the second round after they had drafted his dad Dale Davis 13th overall back in the 90s would definitely get the job done. If there's one thing you should know about TJD, he isn't afraid to yam it on anyone and everyone. The first player in at least 30 years to rise up and drop the hammer 10 times in a single NCAA game. All this tells me is if you get in his way, look out below. So, the Warriors didn't have a second round pick in this year's draft, so how did they end up with Jackson Davis? I mean, why didn't they even have a draft pick in the first place? Does the name Smiley ring a bell? No? Okay. How about Alen Smailagić? Alen Smailagić was a young 6'10 Serbian player, only 17 when he was drafted by the Warriors, and the youngest in history to play in the G League, where he was stashed/hidden so he could develop into the next Joker. Well, he did. Just not the one that Lacob saw in his vision. This team was so invested in Smiley, they moved up in the draft, settling picks and cash to select him above players such as Bol Bol.
Bol crossing over Van Fleet. Sets up, falls to the corner three. Good again.
Talen Horton-Tucker.
To start the fourth quarter because of the energy, the defense, and the driving ability right there, the penetration by Horton-Tucker.
And Jalen McDaniels, just to name a few.
And Lee driving. Oh my goodness! What a track down block by Jalen McDaniels.
Among the picks the Warriors leveraged in order to draft Smiley was the 2023 second round pick. Fast forward to 2023 and the Warriors acquired a second round pick when they traded Jordan Poole, who was the other player drafted the same year as Smiley, but in the first round. When Poole was sent to the Wizards, along with Chris Paul, they sent back a late second round pick, which the Warriors used to draft Jackson Davis, a 23-year-old athletic 6'9" center with a 7-foot wingspan, 4 years of college experience, and a major beef to settle with all the NBA teams that passed on him. So, just how good of a pick is Jackson Davis, and what can we expect from him this year? At 6'9", Jackson Davis stands shoulder to shoulder with Kevon Looney. Despite having a shorter wingspan, however, Jackson Davis props up the Warriors' vertical spacing with a 36-inch max vertical, ranked number 1 for all centers in this year's draft. With his length and athletic ability, he's racked up quite the number of accolades in his 4 years in Indiana. As a senior, he played in 32 games for the Hoosiers, starting in all 32. He would play 34.5 minutes per game and drop an average of 21 points to go along with 11 boards and 3 blocks, right on par with James Wiseman's 3 blocks per game. Sounded pretty good till I mentioned Wiseman, right? These numbers are in fact quite similar to a younger James Wiseman, so you might be thinking, well, did the Warriors just draft another scoring big that just won't be able to contribute? After all, Wiseman averaged 5.5 blocks as a high school senior, but was not a serviceable defender at the NBA level. Well, we're not quite finished, as there's a pretty important stat to mention. That same year, Jackson Davis averaged 4 assists per game. Now this is pretty impressive considering the best he's ever averaged was 1.9 assists per game the year prior. Wiseman, on the other hand, while he showed flashes, never really put together a full season where this skill would have been evident. This implies a much better ability of Jackson Davis to move the ball than the Warriors' former number 2 overall pick. Wiseman averaged less than 1 assist per game, just for comparison's sake. Conceivably, this opens up his game and makes him more of a threat with the ball in his hands. And speaking of hands, he has much better hands now than Wiseman ever did at Golden State. This means better finishing, better positioning, and of course, better passing. Now, none of this is a knock on James Wiseman. While the two are currently only 1 year apart, Wiseman being 22 years old, their journey up to this point has been quite different. If the Warriors could have kept Wiseman on the roster for the rookie scale contract that Jackson Davis will be signed to, they likely wouldn't have traded him. With a dynasty like the Warriors, maximizing the tenure of the Splash Brothers and Draymond Green becomes a bit less basketball and more dollars and cents. That is, does it make sense to keep player X when we can get player Y at 1/10 of the cost, at least 95% of the usable skill, and more likely than not, a better fit? That's without even mentioning the intangibles. Even so, the Warriors scouts, among others, have determined that Jackson Davis will be able to contribute this year. This is pretty important, as I further emphasize that a player's experience will only help them in getting into Steve Kerr's rotation. Despite being drafted later, the impetus is for the Warriors to have TJD signed to a regular non-two-way contract on the 15-man roster. On draft night, teams were calling about Jackson Davis to see if he'd be willing to go on a two-way contract. However, his agent declined, knowing that the Warriors would have immediate use for an experienced big. Now, if you've been watching the clips, there has been one thing missing from Jackson Davis's highlights. To give you another hint that should make it quite obvious, Dunleavy Jr. spoke about having a big that can stretch the floor. The thing is, that's exactly what's been missing from Trayce Jackson Davis. To be more specific, he did not make a single three-point shot in college. The only time there was ever even a record of threes were during his junior year, where he made 3 attempts. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? It's bad in that the Warriors really want shooting at all positions, as alluded to by Dunleavy. A big that can stretch the floor will practically be open from the moment they pull up.
I'm trying to do nothing right now.
Coach said this how to get you right here.
Bro.
You making too many threes, no?
Yes, in the parking lot. Being able to hit those open threes will punish teams that overcommit on Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. With the tertiary perimeter threat in Jordan Poole all but a distant memory, the team will definitely be looking for some additional spacing. No threes, however, can also be a good thing. A big man's job is to crash the boards, clean up, post work, footwork, protect the rim on D, and have good touch around the rim on offense. A hook shot would be nice, and maybe a sweet mid-range jumper to top it all off. Since TJD was not spending any time looking for shots out on the perimeter, this has done nothing but vastly improve his inside game. He is an absolute monster in the paint and dominated both bigger and smaller players. He uses his weight and size to his advantage, and while it might not look like much, at 245 pounds with a high energy level and plenty of aggression, he won't take no for an answer. His footwork is amazing, and he will literally dunk everything. He likes to take the ball into the low post and with a mix of agility and strength, blow by or through his opponents for the finish. Despite that, however, at the combine, he still made 9 of his first 12 three-pointers. So even if he has to take the occasional 3, his approach is perfect for the Warriors. Then there's his passing. Senior year for TJD was wild. For a player of his size to move the way he does, to get the angles he uses, to complete the passes he attempts, not to mention the way he runs the floor on fast breaks, he has the tools to immediately impact the game at the next level. He doesn't lose any steps to smaller players and dishes like he's 5'11". At his size, the court vision, speed, athleticism, aggression, playing style, and just overall dominance he exudes when he plays, if he can't break into Steve Kerr's rotation, I'll be pulling up to the post-game pressers myself and personally grill Steve Kerr. I expect with the change of pace on the second unit that a pick-and-roll offense will come to fruition between Chris Paul and Jackson Davis. Chris's deliberate, slow pace should be enough to catch opposing teams off guard as he cooks with either TJD or Kuminga from helicopter range. Thankfully, we won't have to wait too long to see Trayce in action, as Summer League is about to start in just over a week. The Warriors will get their first look at the players they drafted, and that will of course be followed up with some player analysis. Till then, however, be sure to like the video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on all your notifications so you don't miss any of my latest uploads. Thanks for watching. Till next time, swish!